All right, welcome everyone. My name is Delvin Dinkins. I'm the head of school here at Springside Chestnut Hill Academy, and I'm thrilled to kick off our first Connex experience of the year with a conversation about the rise of analytics in Major League Baseball. In addition to thanking our moderator and panelists that you'll hear from in just a minute, I want to thank Katie Friedland, our Director of Strategic Initiatives and Admissions Outreach, and Melissa Brown, class of 1987, Springside School, who's our Director of Alumni Relations. Our moderator for tonight is SCH parent, Dr. Vanessa Chan. Our three panelists include SCH parent of four and general manager for the Phillies, Sam Fuld, Chestnut Hill Academy, class of 1995, and Philly Scout, Mike Koplov, and CHA class of 1971 and sportscaster for the Seattle Mariners, Dave Sims. We sent you their full bios in advance, but we would like to invite each of them to take a moment to introduce themselves and share their journey to their current station. So let's start with our moderator tonight, Vanessa.
Thanks, Delvin. As Delvin mentioned, I'm your friendly neighborhood moderator today. I'm a Penn engineering professor who currently is on leave of absence to serve the president as the chief commercialization officer and the director of the Office of Technology Transitions for the Department of Energy. I'm the mom of Karina and Ariana, and also former board member. And I absolutely love the SCH community in terms of the diversity of the kinds of things that we do. Who knew that we could get a critical mass to talk about baseball and statistics? But of course, at SCH, you can do that. And we have critical mass to talk about blockchain, energy transitions, all kinds of things. And so it's really incredible that we have key leaders from the National League champions, our hometown incredible Phillies, and an awards-winning sports reporter and broadcaster for over 40 years. And I want to hand it over to our esteemed panelists who are going to do their own intros since I can't do it justice. But before I do, I want them to share three things. One, what's your connection to SCH? Two, what is it that you do? And how did you wind up in the jobs you have today? And when you do so, please put yourself in the shoes or the cleats. I'm going to love the puns here for our SCH students who are sitting where they are right now, seeing all of you and are totally intimidated and are asking themselves, how do I get that dream job that you have? So I'll start off with Sam. Go ahead.
Sure. I think as Delvin and Katie may have mentioned, I'm a parent of four SCH students, Charlie, 7th grade, Jane, 5th grade, Will, 3rd grade, and Spencer, 1st grade. So we were very much embedded in the SCH community and love it. And we've been in Philadelphia for 5 years now, and I've been a part of the SCH community since the beginning. So born and raised in a small town in New Hampshire, baseball lover from the very beginning, played all sorts of sports, but was a lover of baseball and a lover of math, really, from the time I could, pick up a bat or pick up a book. I just loved the game. And I think part of what drew me to the game was the sort of deep connection with numbers that the baseball offers. So I was the kid who at age 5 or 6 was carrying around like stats books and was that was like my security blanket, was just holding on to the paperback books that existed back then that had the stats of every Major League Baseball player. So I had a love for the game and wanted to see how far I could go in the sport as a player, and was lucky enough to be good enough to get a college scholarship. I went to Stanford and played for 4 years there, graduated with a degree in economics, but also drafted by the Chicago Cubs, and started my professional playing career in 2004 and ended up playing 13 years professionally, 4 different organizations. The Cubs came up through the Chicago Cubs system and then played in Tampa, Minnesota, and Oakland, and finally wrapped up my playing career in 2017. But along the way did some things that I think sort of showed my interest and love for the numbers side of the game. When I was a minor leaguer and struggling to stay employed, I did an internship at a company called Stats Inc. and felt like this was a good opportunity to learn a little bit more about the objective side of the game and also prepare myself for life after playing. Luckily, my playing career lasted more than just a couple of years, and I did go back to school to start a master's program in statistics. Again, just sort of setting myself up for life after playing. Also gave me an excuse to go back out and train at Stanford in the off season. And I think never knew when the time would come to hang up the cleats, but when it did, I think I felt like I was in a good position to explore life in baseball beyond playing, and initially took a job with the Phillies 2018. And my job was to essentially be a translator between our analytics group and our players staff, and did that for a couple of years. And I took another role in our then new performance department for a year, and then a couple of years ago was promoted to general manager, where I've been for a couple of years now. So it's been a quick journey, all very much rooted in math and analytics, and that's my story in a nutshell. I'm really excited to be here.
Thank you, Sam. Mike, you want to go next?
Sure. So my tie to CHA or SCH, I call it. I'm sorry, I apologize. When I was there with CHA, I graduated in '95. I spent 3 years there. I was actually, I hate to say it, I was at Penn Charter for the time before that, but I saw the light and said, that looks like a better school. I'd rather go there. So switched over, and never, it was an amazing experience there. I was there for 3 years. I played baseball there. Got recruited to go to colleges from Chestnut Hill, and from that point on, I grew up, born and raised in Philadelphia, downtown Philly. Lived most of my life in South Philly. I still live in the area now, over in Haddonfield, New Jersey. So it's for me, being part of the Phillies is it's kind of in my DNA, and I'm really fortunate to have this opportunity that I do. But anyway, I'm from Chestnut Hill. I went to 2 years at Northwestern University on a baseball scholarship, and that didn't quite work out the way I wanted. I wanted to be a shortstop. That was how I was recruited, and the coach, for whatever reason, thought I should be a pitcher. And so I said, no, I'm not having that. And I transferred to University of Delaware, and they let me do both of those things at Delaware. And as it turns out, I became a pitcher anyway, and spent 14 years of my life playing professional baseball, parts of 7 seasons in the major leagues, most of that with the Diamondbacks. I got extremely lucky as a September call-up in 2001 to be part of the World Series team there. I played with guys that I'd grown up watching, grown up kind of idolizing, and playing against guys that I grew up idolizing. So that was it. When I first got called up, I was spoiled right off the bat to be part of a team that was just filled with veterans and just amazing people, amazing players. It was really cool for me. I also played in the big leagues briefly with the Indians 1 year, now the Guardians, in Cleveland, and that was also a great experience. Actually, the highlight, though, I would say, of my baseball playing career, which was something that I never ever thought would even be on the radar, that baseball provided me, was when I got to play in the Olympics in '08. It was not even something that, like, as a baseball player, you don't even really consider that as a thing. And so that was probably the best thing that I was able to kind of accomplish and be part of. Played through 2011, and at that point it was, what am I going to do with my life? It was, I went back to school. I went back to Delaware. I did classes online. I drove down there a few times, and I got my degree. But in the meantime, 3 years in college, I wasn't ready for a job in anything but baseball, and it was the only thing that I knew, and it was the only thing that I loved. And the Angels hired me as a pro scout, which I maybe we'll get into later. There are different types of scouting, and at that point I was a pro scout, and I was there for 6 years with them, doing various kinds of scouting, and eventually in 2018 I got brought over to the Phillies, and I've been here since. And it's, like I said, it's kind of the dream spot for me, growing up as a Phillies fan, and remembering, the days of like Mike Schmidt and Juan Samuel, which is ahead of a lot of these students' times, but their parents probably remember. Those were the Phillies I grew up watching and loving. So to be just part of this organization it's a super cool experience for me, and I'm grateful for it. So kind of how I ended up here, and excited, as Sam said, to be on this panel and to discuss with this community.
And Mike, there might be people who don't know anything about scouting or baseball, so maybe say what a scout does.
Okay, yeah, sure. So there are different kinds of scouts. Essentially, it comes down to, we're the eyes that go to other ballparks, that go to high schools, they go to colleges, they go to professional ballparks than watch the players. So in high school and college, we're looking at players that we want to draft to bring into the Phillies organization. In professional baseball, we're looking at other teams' players that we might want to trade for, or we might want to sign as a free agent eventually. There's international scouting all over the world, Latin America, Asia, Europe, even where we have scouts that go there and watch those people, and we try to sign those guys and bring them over here also, anyone that we think can help our organization. So we're kind of the on the ground at the ballpark eyes that are seeing these players that hopefully, potentially might be a Philly one day.
Thank you. And last but not least, the origin story for you, Dave.
Good evening, everybody. Yeah, born and raised in Philly, grew up in Mount Airy. As you can see, my background, I live in New York City. I've lived here since 1975. That was the result. And I went to a little school in West Virginia, D3 school, played baseball and football there, Bethany College. And I went there with the intention of learning how to be a sports writer, be in sports media, be a broadcaster. And it worked out really well. And I had a back and forth to Philly over the years. I got an internship at the Inquirer for 2 summers. I got byline, I got paid. I learned a lot. It was like getting a postgraduate degree. And so after that, after I graduated, worked at the New York Daily News as a sports writer for 7 years before I got into broadcasting. And since I've been in broadcasting, I've done sports anchoring on TV and radio. I've done sports talk on TV and radio. I've been doing the Mariners now for 17. I'm going into my 17th year. Did the Phillies Sunday pregame show for a year actually for 2 years with the hope of coming back to Philly. Didn't quite work out, but everything, a whole bunch of other things did work out. Did the Eagles, go Birds. I did their preseason package on TV 1 year. And all in all, I've been unbelievably lucky. I've done Major League Baseball at ESPN, college football and basketball for ESPN, the NFL, and Westwood One Radio. That's national radio. Right now, I'm doing games on Fox, doing Big East games on Fox, and I'm enjoying a heck of a run. Knock wood, thank God. I'm doing exactly what I wanted to do, to be a broadcaster. Bill Campbell, Harry Callis, and those guys were big heroes of mine growing up. And I've always been around athletics. My father used to run the Philadelphia Main Post Office softball league and basketball league. So I've been going to games since I was big. I tell people now that it was a normal occasion for me. Every year Jim Brown and the Browns would come to play the Eagles. We'd go see them. We'd go see Will for the Warriors play 5 or 6 times. We lived 10 minutes from County Mack Stadium when I was growing up. So I was there all the time. And so it's just been a big part of my life, and I feel very fortunate and a lot of gratitude to be able to be in this position. I know I hear from so many kids that, how do I get your job? How do I get in this? I want to do this. I saw your video. I've been lucky. I've got a few awards, got a couple of Emmys. I was 3 times named Washington State Sportscaster of the Year. So, and the Mariners made the freaking playoffs for the first time in 21 years. So we're on a high right now.
Well, we're thrilled to have you. We're thrilled to have you and everybody else. Look, there's quite a few people right now that may be listening in who, like me, know nothing about statistics in baseball. And the way I got ready was to watch Moneyball for this panel. And so for those who didn't get even that far, Sam, I'd love for you to talk a little bit about statistics in baseball and how they became synonymous. And as a real world example, maybe share the story of how you moved player Alec Baum down to the minors last year, and then again, bring him back up to the majors. When a decision like that happens, is it purely based on statistical performance or more philosophical belief that adversity triggers growth? But maybe just get everyone on the same page of why are we talking about baseball statistics in the first place?
Sure. I'll try to keep it brief. It's kind of a long
Good luck, Sam. Yeah. Good luck.
I will say, I mentioned that stats internship that I did when I was in the minor leagues. It was because I read the book Moneyball. They referenced the company a few times, and when I read that book, I thought, oh my God, there are other people in this world that think like me. And one of them was Billy Beane, and the general manager of the Oakland A's, who ironically I played for a few years in Oakland. But I think that was when the world opened its eyes to the power of data And I think at the same time, other industries were definitely sort of understanding the virtue of data, big data, and
And maybe Sam, for those who aren't aware, maybe we can talk a little bit about what was it like before big data, and the role of scouts and how they did things, and then how data really influenced and changed the way that we thought about baseball.
I think it was small data, right? I mean, we just didn't have like computer processing to be able to interpret large data sets, but the box scores have been around in the game of baseball for 100 years, 100+ years, and stats have been around in baseball for a long time. I mean, Branch Rickey was doing stuff 80 years ago that I think we're just getting to. I mean, so it's always been a desire, given all the sort of set plays that exist in baseball. There's 300+ isolated events, 300+ pitches every game that you can really unwind with data. So it was a lot of basic math that I think people were accustomed to tallying, but without computers, really, like we were just limited in what we could do. It would be, this guy had a good game. He got 2 hits and 4 at bats, and that was good. And there were eyes in the ballpark everywhere. I think that's how really like teams would evaluate players. It was really exclusively an eye test, and none of that has changed. But I think the role of data has certainly supplemented and advanced the way that we look at players, both through the lens of acquisition, how we choose to acquire players, whether they're amateurs or through trades of other professional players, or in the way of player development, how we get players better once they become part of the organization. So it has really changed it, and it's become incredibly complex. And we have, an analytics group that is growing rapidly. It's gone from 0 to 5 to 20+ in the Phillies organization over the course of 8 or 9 years. So
You love hiring SCH alums, I heard, right?
It's the only kind we hire.
I just wanted to check. And so kind of tying this to Alec Baum, talk a little bit about that decision and how much you balance statistics versus other things. Great
question. I think, the performance was at the center of it. I mean, he was not performing, and no matter what sort of data you used, he was not sort of performing up to his capability. It certainly was not meeting the bar that he had set the year prior when he was second in the rookie of the year voting. And he's the 3rd overall pick in the 2018 draft. I mean, there's a lot of cachet behind him, and I think a lot of expectations. So his lack of objective performance was at the core of it. But I think we definitely saw a lot of value in him being able to sort of hit that reset button, which we couldn't capture objectively. I think there is evidence in sort of hitting a reset button, both inside and outside of sports. It can really, provide value, but we're sort of going on a hunch that like just, refreshing his mind and allowing him to take a step back and go to AAA would prove well for him in the long term. And he bounced back, to his credit, this year. He had a wonderful year and helped us get to the World Series.
So, I want to pick up on that hunch and hand it over to Mike, right? Where there's kind of like 2 types of scouting, right? You're looking for future players as well as teams the Phillies are preparing to compete against. And so if you look at, how scouting has changed with the role of analytics, how much do you need to see players in action if you can read their performance data? What do you consider to be measurable qualities of a player that data is useless in determining? And how much do you kind of use the hunch or the gut instinct, right, to really make a decision? Because these are major decisions on who you're bringing in.
Right. Yeah. No, it's so from a scouting standpoint, like there are certain things that clearly that you need to be at the ballpark to see. And that amount of things is actually surprisingly shrinking. Like 5 years ago, even, we weren't discussing certain things about pitch design and pitch, the way pitches break and things like that. They couldn't quite measure it even in the recent past. And they're figuring out how to do that. And that kind of stuff is becoming more and more measurable. But at the same time, you can ask anyone who's been in baseball, and Sam and Dave can tell you, when you sit behind home plate, you see the game in a way that nothing else, there's no measurable way to really define it other than experience, having been in a batter's box or having been on a mound and gone through that and figuring those kinds of things out and watching it and knowing, hey, that's a slider that will play in the major leagues. that one's not. And sometimes a guy might have a slider that has certain metrics that are really good, and for whatever reason it doesn't play as good as those metrics would indicate. And sometimes the inverse is true, and a guy gets people out and you're left scratching your head exactly why it is and trying to figure it out. I remember watching a guy who the Phillies had, I've had now twice, and did a good job for us this year, David Robertson. I remember watching him 10 years ago and wondering to myself, why in the world does this guy strike everyone out throwing 92 miles an hour? He blows everyone away. And we couldn't quite figure it out from a scouting standpoint, but you could see it. And the metrics, on the other hand, have kind of been able to define what that is. Those things are that make him so good. But there are other things that being in the ballpark, you need to be there for. And in addition, there are things that are off the field that scouts are really good at, especially on the amateur side of scouting with high schools and colleges, where we have scouts that go into these players' homes and talk to them, talk to their families, get to know these players, because it's not just physical talent that gets a player to the major leagues. You can look at Sam, you can look at myself. We're not 6'4" and 225 pounds. I didn't throw 100 miles an hour. He couldn't hit the ball 510 feet. There are certain other things, immeasurable attributes, that you need to know about a player, and not every scout gets that, but a lot of scouts are able to kind of figure out that stuff, talking to people that they know, talking to the player themselves, talking to the player's coaches, the player's family, those kinds of things. So those are things that scouts are good at, in addition to how good is this guy's curveball, what kind of hands does this infielder have. Those are other things that scouts are there for. But it's changed, and there are certainly two sides of it, and you'll hear that those sides sometimes butt heads, and that's true. There are certain scouts that don't want to play nice with the analytics departments, and I'm sure it's vice versa. But for the most part, we've kind of acknowledged this is the way the game's going. It's an important part of it. It's got to be a symbiotic relationship between the two sides, because there's plenty of stuff that I don't know that people in a different position are there, and it's their job to figure out, and they do a good job of it. And there are certain things that I can tell them that they're unable to see through numbers and data and computers and analysis. So it's like I said, it's both sides working together, and the better you can do that, the more success you have. And the teams that are successful nowadays have a really good balance of those two things.
So that's good to know that we're not just going to algorithms, and there is some humans behind the decisions, which is going beyond whatever the computer spitting out. I think there is a dark side of statistics, and based on some of the questions that we got in advance, I think there's some people who are listening who really want me to ask you guys all of this. And there's like questions that are thread from Bill Eastman, Sam Franklin, Jeff McLaughlin, and Kurt Reyes, which are all kind of the dark side statistics. And really the theme is, does anyone feel guilty about how this understandable revolution has made the game less fun by removing artistry and inserting cold calculus? And, if there's any way that it's really been a bad thing for the sport of baseball. And there's even some specific baseball aficionados who said things like, I have not seen a guy steal 80 bases or more since I was a kid in the 1980s. And someone else has said, has analytics damaged the game we grew up with before the 100 pitch limit, the 5-man rotation, and the designated hitter? And I have to admit, I had to Google all of that. But just want to throw it out there for all of you. Is there a bad side of statistics, and has it ruined the game?
Man, I can start. I'm sure there's a lot to talk about here, but the answer is no. It's all good. I'm just kidding. There is some, I think, some downstream effects that are sort of results that the league is sort of grappling with. If you're a baseball fan, you're aware of some of the rule changes that are being implemented this year, which will be really interesting stuff. They're going to put a pitch clock out there, so they'll basically be like a shot clock in the NBA. You have to throw a pitch in a certain amount of time. They're going to they're going to ban the infield shift, which is sort of taking away hits that have traditionally been hits in the game before. They'll have big pizza box size bases out there. There's a number of rule changes that are all being implemented just in the name of making the game more interesting and engaging. And I think some of the sort of cascading effects of more and more analytics influence is that you're getting the results in the field are more and more this 3 true outcome, which is a strikeout, a walk, or a home run. And people love home runs, but strikeouts and walks can get kind of boring. And people want balls in play. And these rules are an attempt to try to generate more action when the ball is put in play and to speed up the time in between pitches so that there's less time to, get on your phone in between pitches and you can actually watch the baseball game. So I think those are that's one example that comes to mind. As I said, a numbers lover, so I don't mind the advanced metrics that exist and are kind of pervasive everywhere you go. But I can understand where you want to. Baseball's a game that I think you can watch passively, and you don't necessarily need to be locked in as a fan for 3 hours and understand the underlying equation of a stat like WOBA or weighted runs created plus and all these fancy acronym stats that exist right now. So I can appreciate that, but I think we're doing a good job of balancing the two and providing information that stats lovers and stats haters can digest equally.
So Dave, you're a reporter and a storyteller. So I would love for you, even if you may agree somewhat with Sam, what's the counter of it, right? You're someone who's really trying hard to get people to love and appreciate baseball during it. And we have seen a decline in baseball viewership over time. Do you think statistics is driving that? Are there things that there is a dark side to it?
I don't, here's the thing. When I'm doing a broadcast, I don't have time to explain to grandma from Bothell, Washington, weighted, WRC and war and all that kind of stuff. I'm trying to tell a story of Sam Fuld, Mike Koplov, trying to talk about their journey, their ins and out, how they're performing in front of us right now. It's not a time for me to be putting on a seminar with these numbers. Now, I like these numbers and I take them to a point. It helps to, as I go into a game, to know how a guy is trending, but to sit there for the 2.5, 3 hour broadcast and pound those numbers is not going to work. You have to figure it out. And the other thing too, that Sam knows this and Mike knows this, baseball's a game, but we have to have a blend. You have to see it and feel it, and you have to know what's in a guy's heart, what's in a guy's guts, and how he's going to work in the group dynamic, how he's going to work under pressure. Those are other things that you might not necessarily be able to put in a computer and spit it out and find something out.
That makes sense. And, I think this is a kind of question that came from Kristen Herman, who's a SCH parent, which is really around, how far did statistics really get us, right? After the coaching change in 2022, the Phillies didn't have any change in players, but those same players had a dramatically different performance. So what did Rob Thompson change or do to achieve more with the same players? And could statistics have predicted that success, or is the gel of the team the element that transcends the models?
I can take a crack at it, Cop. You can chime in too, but I had the pleasure of working with Rob Thompson for 4 years before I became the manager, and so I think we all knew we had a good feel for who he was as a human and what kind of influence he'd have on our team if he were to step into the manager role. And I think more than anything else, Dave just mentioned it before he abandoned us, it seems, the culture component, the chemistry component is really tough to put a finger on. And I think someday we may be able to, but right now I think we're just sort of understand the importance of it, but hard to put a finger on exactly how much it impacts the game. But I think this year's a really good example of how it does impact the game. Rob Thompson's really good at communicating. So if you're the 26th guy on the roster who never plays, he's going to put his arm around you and talk to you as much as he's going to talk to Bryce Harper. He's going to make you feel like you're part of the team as much as you are Bryce Harper is. And I think he's going to let people be who they are. And in this Philly market, which is the fishiest of fish bowls, it's important to let guys sort of relax. The game of baseball, anybody who's played the game or anybody who plays golf or any sport that, can be some anxiety involved. It's meant to be played loose and easy and having fun. And that's hard to do in this market. But Rob does a fantastic job of keeping things light, and he's normal every day. He's the same guy every day and doesn't let any moment get to him. And I think those are some intangibles that Rob brought to us as the manager. And I think you guys fed off that for sure.
Mike, I'm sure you have thoughts on this too. Oh, have we lost him too?
I Yeah, I wasn't around the clubhouse. I didn't. What hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
I'm frozen.
You're a little choppy.
Okay, all right, yeah. I sorry about that. Yeah, I was saying I wasn't in the clubhouse, around the clubhouse at all. Every clubhouse kind of has a different dynamic, and I think part of the role at the major league level of a coaching staff, the manager, the pitching coach, the hitting coach, whatever, is you're not teaching anyone how to play baseball. You're not, you're working with their strength, their swing or whatever. You're tinkering if need be, but a lot of times you're kind of the psychiatrist. You're the father or whatever, that is just managing men who are failing. The good ones are failing 70% of the time. The great ones are, and the pitchers are pitching out, walking guys in front of 50,000 people, and there's a lot of that. For certain teams, you need a certain demeanor of a manager, and it just seemed from a outside observer watching it, and I'm sure our fans kind of got that feeling too, that Rob Thompson did a really good job of managing the men in the clubhouse and keeping them, as Sam said, kind of on an even keel up and down throughout the season, and working on kind of that psychology of baseball, because that's such a big factor of it. And there is very little to measure there in terms of, statistically or whatever. At the same time, they have to be able to communicate the stuff that the front office is telling them, and some managers are better at that and some managers are not. And I think that's the way the game is trending, that the managers have to be fluent in that kind of dialogue also. But at the end of the day, you're talking to these players who don't always, and they're starting to get a better grasp of that kind of stuff, but they don't always know, especially the older ones in the game, or they don't buy into it. And the manager's job at that point is to just kind of direct the team and like I said, be the leader. And I think Rob did a really good job of that and communicating and reaching our players in a way that wasn't happening for whatever reasons before that. And sometimes that's what it takes for a team to kind of click.
And that's great. There's a balance of quantitative and qualitative in this, which is really great to hear. Sam had mentioned that the rules are changing, right? And so I'm curious in terms of how are you going to evolve your evaluations? I'm not sure, Mike, if you want to spill your secret sauce to all of our friends here around how you're going to think more about scouting. But, as things change, how do you guys change your algorithm, or what is it that you place importance on?
I mean, for me, it won't change too much. Whether or not a guy gets his pitch off in 22 seconds or 18 seconds. If it's a good pitch, it's a good pitch. And those are the things that I look for, how hard a guy hits the ball, how consistently he hits it hard, how fast a guy is, what the shape of a guy's breaking ball is, how much swing and miss he gets on his fastball. Those are things that I'm looking for in the ballpark. And, the rule changes or whatever, those are for people that's what their job is. It's a totally different aspect, and certainly it ties in, and I have to consider all of that stuff too. But I'm there to be in the ballpark to watch the game physically, and then there's people to tie all.
So Sam, since you guys are such good friends, you can finish his sandwiches for him. We lost you there for a minute, Mike. Sam,
sorry
on this.
Man, I feel like I'm the next one whose internet's going to go. But
I hope not. Delvin, I hope you know a lot about baseball, because I'm going to call on you next.
Oh, boy.
Get your Google tab open.
Oh, okay. Thanks for
Go
that.
ahead, Sam.
It's funny. It's a timely question I asked. I was walking out of the ballpark about 2.5 hours ago, and I bumped into one of our young QAs, quantitative analysts, who I had seen in a little bit. And like the first thing that came out of his mouth was, how much should I freak out about these rule changes in our projection system? And you like see the panic in his eyes. And I said, well, you shouldn't freak out, but it is going to change things. And, a lot of what we do, both when it comes to acquiring players and how we sort of use strategy and use numbers within the context of a game to help our in-game strategy. A lot of it is forward facing. Like it's one thing to look back in time and evaluate what happened, but your money's made when you can predict the future a little bit and make good bets. And so far, our infield positioning is an example. That's what he was asking about. He's saying, how do we account for the band infield shift? And everything that we have is based off of what has already happened. So I said, well, we know where guys have hit the ball, and we can project where guys have to stand for the most part going forward. And that's how we're going to approach it. And that's as profound as my advice went. It's up to him now to figure out how to actually incorporate that into our forward-facing models. But essentially, we can use estimations as to where guys will stand and not where they have stood. And I think there are going to be some players that benefit from these rule changes more than others. And I definitely went into our calculus this offseason. I mean, thinking about a guy like Trey Turner, who is maybe the game's fastest player, when you have an extra sort of 3 inches in between the base paths, suddenly his 30 or 40 stolen bases might turn into 40 or 50 or 60. And that's really appealing to us. Whereas nothing against like a Reese Hoskins, he's probably going to have a few stolen bases no matter what. But somebody like Trey Turner might turn into a little bit different player because of the rule change.
It'll be interesting to see how that changes. So we can have a follow-up next season to understand what happened.
Don't tell him I said he's going to get 50.
Don't worry, this is only recorded and being distributed globally. So one thing I wanted to make sure we talked about was career advice, because we are at a school, and quite a few people submitted questions around, if a student is interested in pursuing a career in sports statistics, what should they focus on in high school and later in college, and what advice would you give them on what they need to do? One thing I will note is that both of you mentioned that you used to be ball players. How important is that? Or can you just be good at numbers? And so what advice would you give to the students who really want your jobs one day?
I can start on that. It matters, but it doesn't matter. There are so many players in baseball so many people in baseball, working in baseball nowadays, that did not play. There are scouts that didn't play, plenty of them. Some of them may have played in high school. Some of them didn't even do that. It takes a passion for the game. It takes somebody who's willing to figure out what it is that the teams are interested in learning, and interested in finding out, and digging and doing that kind of work. And like obviously, yeah, for me at least, I think it helps what I do as being a former player. But like I said, there are so many players. It takes interest in it. It takes passion. It takes patience, resilience, because it's a hard industry to break into. But once you're in, it's a lot of fun to work in it, especially if it's something that you care about. I mean, it's a fun game, and it's, I can't say more than that. If it's something you're passionate about, it's certainly worth it.
And thank goodness we know some people who are leaders in this area that SCH people could call you if they were interested, which is good. Sam, what are your thoughts? And maybe even talk about, what classes they should be taking in high school or college, and, really how they can set themselves up so the resume is more attractive to you when you're looking at it.
Sure. I think the cool thing about the game is, as Mike alluded to, is that there's a lot of different paths to entering into the industry. We have think of a software engineer that we just hired who was a Starbucks barista previously. I think about some of the other people that we have in our research and development team. They're English majors in college and just took a non-traditional path to where they are now. So I guess if it were easy to sort of follow the script, a lot more people would do it. But luckily, there's just a lot of different, some are more winding than others, but there's a lot of different paths to getting into the baseball world, whether it's into scouting or into player development or into analytics or anything in between. So I think Mike touched on it. The word passion stands out. I think you just have to love the game. We have crazy hours, and we do make big sacrifices with the other stuff that we do. Our families and any sort of hobbies that we may have tend to go by the wayside. But so baseball has to be a hobby and a love and a passion of yours. And when we just sort of look at our big pool of candidates and we look through resumes, I think hopefully your passion can stand out in the resume, in the application. There's no one particular course or one particular area of study that I think we focus in on. I mean, certainly the ability to like technical skills are really important. So the ability to write code, and your proficiency in R and SQL and Python, and it's all really important. It's not important to be a major league manager and be able to write code, but there are more and more positions in the game where that is a big part of what they do. I mean, there are organizations that are hiring in uniform staff who have the ability to write code and are really technically skilled. So if there's any one area I'd suggest like directing people towards, it's in that area, but more than anything, like love the game, watch the game, take a well-rounded approach to it. I'd say like expose yourself to as many different sort of resources that are available. So watch the game, read articles. There's so much good public information out there. Try to identify what might be missing in the industry and like hunt that down and do the best you can on your own to try to maybe provide a little bit of a morsel of information that an organization may see on a resume and go, oh, that's really interesting. I tried to do that unsuccessfully about 15 years ago. I did it manually and in a notebook, and I was like logging like tedious data on foul balls because I didn't know of any like data out there on foul balls, and spent hours and hours and hours on it and ended up losing my notebook, and it got me nowhere. But I think it showed that I was like willing to pour my heart and soul into this silly game called baseball. And I think that's more than anything what's important to us.
And can I just point out to the audience that neither of you mentioned SAT score, GPA, or these other things that our high school students are absolutely stressed out about. And so does that stuff matter when you're looking?
I would say it's far down the list. It really is. It is. It's luckily we are not, other than just sort of focusing on SCH graduates, we are not married to any particular college or any
Good answer.
SAT score. It really is about the quality of your work, the references that you have, and again, like the passion that you show in your candidacy.
Great. And for audience members, if you want to type in any Q&A, feel free to do that. And thank you to the folks who in advance had sent over some questions, which we are ticking through. But feel free to add to the chat if you have any other questions. We talked a lot about kind of technology and the evolution of things. The data lake continues to grow astronomically, massively. I was just over at the Consumer Electronics Show where you look at the proliferation of just technology and Internet of Things and things like that. And so really want to kind of understand, what do you think's next, right? Are there big data sets that are kind of unsung heroes that one should be looking at? Is there technology that you think is going to be a game changer? I mean, the evolution on technology and data is going at a clock speed that no one can even really keep up with. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think there's zero doubt that the world of biomechanics is going to influence the game in a really meaningful way. It already has. Every major league stadium has had these Hawkeye radar systems that, they're computer and camera and radar systems that they log they capture data of every pitch thrown, and as Mike alluded to, they can give you data on how each ball moves, how hard a ball comes off the bat, how fast each player is when they run. And now we're getting into like the teams have access to skeletal data, so they're able to see how each joint moves at every split second, and you can capture joint acceleration and velocities and angles and unbelievable, like vast amounts of data that we're still just sort of scratching the surface on. But I think we'll be able to really better injury prevention, injury prediction. I think we'll be able to capture some underlying skills that exist that don't necessarily show up right away, but just how humans move is a really fascinating subject that takes huge sort of data science teams to understand. But when you marry that with what we have already and really skilled pitching coaches and pitching evaluators like Mike, I think that's when it becomes really exciting. So there's no doubt in my mind that's sort of the next paradigm shift in the game.
Yeah, I'll add to that. Like, and this is kind of happening like almost exponentially in terms of the speed in which, like, if you would have been in a draft room 6 years ago compared to the draft room that I was in 6 months ago, there's so much more that we're hearing about in terms of what things that Sam is talking about with body movement and the things that we're measuring and the information that we have with all of that kind of stuff. Just a few years ago, it was just like, what's his spin rate? Oh, his spin rate is really good on his fastball. And that was the cool new thing. And now that's just just another measurable that we have that we're just adding to and adding to and adding to every year and getting more information about players and that help us to kind of evaluate them. It's fascinating to see it happen in real time and to see the different things that now kind of are going into and becoming pieces of the pie when we're evaluating players and making player decisions. It's happening at such a fast speed that 20 years ago it didn't even exist. 20 years ago, if I would have told you, there's enough just things you don't even think about, like player nutrition. Before games, when I played, they gave us dozens of pizza and Hooters chicken wings to eat before we went out and played in a baseball game. Randy Johnson was going out there on a stomach filled with like a dozen chicken wings, and that doesn't exist anymore. Like every area of the game is changing as we learn more and more about it, and about what makes players excel, and it's happening at warp speed.
So it has made it less fun if you can't be stuffed full of chicken wings before you
exactly or in a pizza coma in the fourth inning in the bullpen trying to stay awake. Exactly.
There's a question from the chat that I really like, which is asking both of you, are there any coaches at CHA that had a major effect on your maybe teachers? Like, I think one of the special things is really the mentor relationships that we have here. So give the opportunity to, talk about the role those folks have had.
For me, there were every teacher. I had such an amazing experience there at school there. When I was there, my physics teacher, Mr. Baumberger, was like my favorite teacher ever. Mr. Cooper Smith. These are names from, I don't know how involved they are in the community anymore. He was my math teacher. John McCardle, who recently passed away, was my baseball coach, and he was just such a great guy. And it was the whole community just had a huge effect on my life, and it was just such a warm, inviting, just homey community from the minute I walked in there, which was not what I was expecting, because I grew up in South Philly and I thought Chestnut Hill, no, Chestnut Hill, but it was nothing like I expected, and it was such a better experience than I would have ever dreamed of. And it was, I'm thankful for every one of the teachers that I had there. I don't have a negative thing that I could even think of about any of the teachers that I had.
Well, that's still true right now at SCH. And I know Dave was able to join back because he has technical difficulties. There's another question here, Sam, that I'd love to ask you is, are analytics a big factor in big signings? Schwarber, Castellanos, Turner, etc. And if so, what stats do you focus on to try and get the best value out of each signing?
Short answer is yes. We definitely lean on objective data to help make those decisions. And as we said, like we're the way we evaluate is blending subjective data with objective data. And every player that we bring on board, really, maybe the first question we ask is, what is his makeup like? How is this player going to fit into our clubhouse? How is he going to help or hurt our team chemistry? And that's like a really good foundation that we go off of. And then, I think there's a whole host of data that we look at to sort of try to predict the future. Ultimately, in a really simplified manner, if you're a position player, we look at your abilities in sort of three simple ways. It's how are you going to help as a hitter? How are you going to help as a defender? And how are you going to help as a base runner? And those three things you can sort of capture individually, again, based off of your performance history. And we're going to weigh your more recent performance history more heavily than your the stuff you did in your rookie year 8 years ago. But in a simplified way, we try to sort of divorce those three components of the game and add them all together and use a consistent unit of measurement. Runs are what win us baseball games. And ultimately we're trying to win a World Series every year. And we know that you have to win a bunch of games to do that. And there's a certain threshold to get to the playoffs. Usually now we have an expanded playoff format, but generally if you get to about 88, 89 wins, you got a good chance at getting into the playoffs. So in theory, when you add up the individual win contributions of each player, you want that to add up to at least 88, 89, and hopefully it's more like 100. But really we know that you can really sort of strip those influences away and add them all together. And a guy like Kyle Schwarber, if you're going to give him 4 years and $79 million, you want him to be worth at least a couple wins and help you get to the World Series.
I have a great question here from someone who's 12 years old. That's anonymous. And they want to know, do you think your jobs will still be jobs in 15 years? And Sam, maybe for those who don't know, because you didn't really talk about what a GM does, maybe you can talk a little bit about, what your job is.
I generally manage. Yeah, we have a growing baseball operations group. So I mean, there are 250 members of our baseball operations group. So it's hard to capture like my day to day. My every day is different. I use the analogy of a sort of pinball machine a lot. I feel like I'm sure everybody on this Zoom call can relate to this in some fashion, but throughout the course of any given day, I might be thinking about, or at least sort of overseeing, the kind of food that we're going to provide in spring training to our players and staff and how much it's going to cost. And then the next moment I'm looking at the waiver wire and seeing what players have been recently designated for assignment and which players we might want to put a waiver claim on. And then I'm be talking about what kind of carpet we want to put into the clubhouse. And there's a lot of really interesting things that go on over the course of a day. And then there's a lot of not so interesting things, but we have a number of departments that have department heads that some funnel up through me, not all, but there's a lot of people management more than anything. I think the biggest learning curve for me has been the people management side of things and keeping people developed and engaged and feeling attached to the end product on the field. So sorry, that's a bit of a ramble, but
no, I think it's a good one because basically there's no way a computer can do all of that, which is good.
Yeah, I would say maybe in 150 years, but in 15 years, I'd be surprised if really any of our current jobs went in a different direction.
Mike, what's your thought?
Yeah, so scouting is I guess a little different in that some teams have sort of done away with some parts of their scouting departments in the past, and some of the teams that have done that have already circled back and undone that. They're the teams that went super analytic heavy. I know that Astros at one point canned like most of their pro scouting staff because they didn't think that they needed it, and that got them a lot of animosity from a lot of the other teams in the league, and especially a lot of the other scouts of other teams in the league. So my answer is yes. I think scouting will be around. Certainly, it may look a little different in terms of the way that guys' roles are defined. I may not just be an amateur. Well, I'm not, but more guys may not just be an amateur scout or a pro scout or an international scout. It may be more intermeshed, or teams may go back in the other direction. The game is kind of cyclical. It always has been, and it may circle back a little bit more that way. I think some teams, like I said, are sort of doing that, but it's impossible to say. I do think there will always be scouts. There will always be a need for teams to send guys to look at players on the field and to talk to players and to figure out the things that they can't figure out in the office. But I do think it'll look different. It already does look different than it did 15 years ago, and it'll continue to evolve. I would say I would strongly hope that the scouts are the most highly paid people in the entire industry. I think that's the way that the game should be trending. I think that's the right move from my
good use of
personal
lobbying. Good use of lobbying here.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And in the last kind of 2 minutes, would love each of you to spend 30 seconds on what are you excited the most about Phillies for this upcoming year? We're huge fans of you, and we want to know what should we be looking forward to and what's exciting you the most.
I'll go first because Sam will actually have some real meat and bones there in terms of the on-field stuff. for me, I mean, like I said, I grew up a Phillies fan. Like this past season was incredible. I think it's always hard to it's hard to do what we did. You know, if you would have asked us on September 1st if we honestly thought we were going to end up where we ended up, it would have been kind of, you know, I don't know. I mean,
Well, we know
who
that
really thought
because
that?
we scheduled this for October because you
That's
guys never
true.
thought you would be in the
Exactly.
World Series. So,
So
you absolutely know that.
it's extremely hard, but this is a really good team that plays together well, and we have added some really good players. I mean, Trey Turner is a superstar, and he's going to be really fun to watch. I'm excited for my son, who's 10, to go watch him play all the time. So it's going to be a really fun summer, and there's no place like Citizens Bank Ballpark when the Phillies are good. So I'm excited for it, and I'll let Sam close it out.
Yeah, it's in a simple way of saying it. I'm looking forward to losing my voice again. Like Bryce Harper hit that home run to put us up against San Diego and essentially got us to the World Series. I was in the GM box with my boss, Dave Dombrowski, and a couple others, and I just screamed at the top of my lungs, and I lost my voice immediately. And like, I don't think anybody heard me. And that, as Mike said, the place was and is electric. And I'm just excited to get excited again. And the energy that was in the ballpark for the playoffs is just everything that had been cracked up about. I heard for 5 years, like, wait till the Phillies get to the playoffs. It's unbelievable. And I'm thinking, all right, well, I've played in a bunch of different playoffs, and every stadium's amazing in the playoffs. And then when we set off like seismographs and made people think that there were earthquakes, I understood what everybody was talking about. So I'm just excited to see what kind of crowds we get in April and May and June. And hopefully we can play well from the beginning and really continue to use the crowd to our advantage, because there's no doubt in the playoffs, like, they helped us get to the World Series. Bryce Harper said it best. It was 26 players plus 44,000. I think he was off by a couple, 46,000, but he added a couple. But that's really what I'm looking forward to, is the energy in the ballpark.
That's awesome. Let's make sure we don't start an earthquake though. But this is fantastic. Look, this has been an amazing panel. I really want to thank Sam, Mike, and Dave, who unfortunately had some technical issues, but this is an amazing community, and all of you are connected to SCH. And I learned a lot today, and thank you to all the participants for their questions during and before. And I look forward to cheering all of you guys on in this upcoming season.
Absolutely. And I join you in that, Vanessa, and thank you so much for moderating. And thank you to our panelists. You all were incredible. I learned a lot for sure. I've taken a few notes. Thank you so much for giving your time for our school community. And I wish you well. And here we go on to the next season. So thanks so much, everybody. And good night. Thanks so much for joining us.
Good night.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.